Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and start. We do have another host that will be letting people in so that we can start with Seeing Astrology. Hi, my name is Amanda Smith. This is my sign name, and I work with Community Direct with Deaf Community Support Center here in Minnesota. My goal for this webinar is, of course, as we go through our journey through the pandemic and we go through isolation and things change, people change, we realize, we see what our skills are and within our journey and what has affected us within our environment. Now that we're done with the pandemic, now things, maybe things are coming back to normal, maybe things are unknown. Right now, we're just trying to kind of go on that journey, what we're struggling, things we're trying out, and something like astrology. We thought it was very unique, but can have how it physically connects with our physical bodies and our mental. So I'm not really good at astrology. That's why we invited Aylah to come as specialist, as really cool, so that we cope and we learn as we go through our journey. So Aylah, I am very excited to be here. I'm looking forward to provide this webinar. Really, I just wanted to start with and say that um, we want it to be as visually friendly. So when you come in, if you're present, if you please can keep your screen off, that'll be a lot easier for us. So as I screen share my PowerPoint. All right. If you do have any questions, don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to comment on the chat. So before we begin, I wanted to make sure that we're clear. I do astrology. Um, and I advise on that, but I am not a medical professional or medical practitioner. So this is if information in regards to your health or psychology, that's not me. I can't give advice. But if you're required such advice, you should seek a licensed professional. So the important part of astrology and some major planets that we need to consider, especially in your star chart. The biggest planet to consider is in regards to your health. So first and foremost, we have the sun. We're very popular. We all know the sun. We all know what our star sign in, what month we were born. The sun informs us a lot about what kind of plans, what to envision with your health and what matches best with you. For example, what kind of exercise plan? What kind of food plan fits you? What energy levels do you tend to have? The sun, that's what informs you of that. So we'll expand more and give some examples later on the PowerPoint. So your sun, it'd be representative of star sign, as you know. It could be a fatigue, lack of motivation, um, uninterested in things. That's what their sun can inform you a lot on what your motivative styles are, what gets you excited, what can continue on in your exercise plan, in your eating plan, and on also in your health journey. Second biggest one that we have and you need to consider within your health journey is our moon sign. That would inform you a lot about your self-care. If you're a runner, if you do a lot of sports, how we care for our bodies, resting well, eating well, and provides all the nutrition values that we need and what gets us going. If your moon sign is the underrepresented lines of a moon sign is maybe you'll notice your hormones can be imbalanced. Also, you also notice some irritability or poor digestion. And we can, again, we'll go in more in later. Thirdly, a major placement to consider would be your rising sign. Your rising sign is dependent on the time you were born. So if you don't know what time you were born, there's a lot of locations that you can figure that out, and then you'll figure out what your rising sign is. So your rising sign represents and how it's divided into in different houses within your natal chart. The houses will be different, presents different areas. So your rising sign represents what you're strongly correlated with, which is physical traits or your physical qualities, and also what kind of strength level you have. If you notice that you do have a low immunity, and you get sick often, maybe you get injured often, that means that your rising sign is underrepresented. So if it's overly representative, then you'll notice that there's a lot of accidents, a lot of injuries, a lot of burnout, anxiety. And those are the physical representations that are connected to your first house, which we'll look into within the planet within that first house. Now, let's put those aside. There are two planets. I want to caution before I say bad planets, but these planets have a little bit more of a negative health impact. So the two planets, when you notice that are underrepresented and you have symptoms that are more severe, a lot more noticeable. So maybe they're noticeable a lot in your health journey, maybe, or injuries and trauma in the past, or things that are in correlations to health and your eating, so on and so forth. Those tend to be under those two planets. So those two planets are going to be Mars. Mars is, an agitating and inflammatory. So let's say a lot of itching or a lot of irritation. And also, for example, in that area that you notice that there is a lot of issues or problems. So do we just, it's really important to just see what we can balance within that planet. And I'll expand more about how we can be in balance later in the PowerPoint. The second planet that we'll discuss would be Saturn. Saturn is more of is more cold and more persistent and chronic. So for example, if you have long-term health issues and you have noticed that would be represented within your Saturn. And we'll have more examples to clarify on that if you have any questions or any doubts. There's a lot of information that all at once. So, and we can expand on everything, but we'll go with it. All right. So now we've talked about the planets and the houses. Now we have two dividing factors and kinds of energies. So I call them active and receptive. Maybe you've noticed words like feminine and masculine energy. That's I don't use that terminology. Or yin and yang. That's another term that is used. Those they will fall under those two categories. So when we call about active signs, so meaning higher energy, higher output, higher metabolism, and those what is needed for balance. For example, I would say of an active sign would be air or fire sign placements. So if you're a Gemini, Leo, Aquarius, Sagittarius, so air and fire are considered to be active signs. So, receptive signs, those tend to be lower energy, more chill, more observant, reserved, tend to have a lower metabolism, not really a high energy, and that's not their body type. So their exercise level would be a lot slower and don't need that much. And signs that fall under that receptive would be earth and water. So Taurus, Cancer, those are two good examples that both could be very energetic and exercise, but they're more on the chill side and lay back and mellow kind of exercise. And we'll expand on what exercise would fit with each sign later on. So when we go back to active signs, it's a lot faster pace for speed and exercise, more calories burned, more sweat. When it comes to a receptive sign, again, more holistic, more slower pace, more long term. A perfect example would be for an active sign, they like to run. For a receptive sign, they like to long distance running, like a marathon. So when it comes to receptive, they have a lower pace. So they tend to get injured if they overexercise. When it comes to active signs, if they don't exercise enough, they tend to notice that they're not satisfied, that they're not feeling at their best. So their body feels off and their health is off. So now we have active and receptive. Now we're going to focus on modalities. I just recently mentioned what more active and reactive of which signs are stronger and faster pace, which are slower. So how do each sun approaches that? So for example, for cardinal signs, that would be Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. All are under the category of cardinal signs. What that means, they tend to initiate things. They like to move. They like to be extremely direct and forcefully, fast, forcefully. Next group that we'll see will be the fixed signs, and those will be Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius. They tend to prefer their approach is more stable for a long period of time. So if you think about, carrying their energy through a whole entire season. Last but not least would be the mutable signs. And those signs are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. Those are mutable signs. So they like to be flexible. It's all about flexibility. So why do I go for each cardinal fixed and mutable sign and how I will explain a little bit more. So let's use running, for example. I previously mentioned that cardinal sign, the active, tend to want to go fast and receptive a little bit slow. So now that we are looking at the individual signs, we can go a little bit more. So for example, if you are a runner, when it comes to a cardinal sign, they prefer to be speed, long sprints. For a fixed sign, they like to be, let's say, long distance or marathon running. For mutable signs, they like running in different environments. So they don't like the same monotony. They like something different. They like running, like going to the gym. They like running in nature, so on and so forth. Try to keep it interesting. That's really important to know Because I'm a Taurus, so like a Taurus, if you force me to run fast or a sprint, I am not crazy about that. I prefer to, take my time. I prefer to have longer exercises. So when you know and you understand your energy, what kind of exercise and what kind of nutrition that would give you energy to mix with your personality is better to work for it than to work against it and to be successful. So, and to match your energy. Okay, so now we're going to expand a little bit and we're going to go more in depth. So we have air signs, which are represented in which parts of the body they're represented. So it represents our nervous system, our lungs, and gas in our body. During exercise and during nutrition, we need to keep in mind what stimulates and the different mental stimulation. They control the emotions, hormones, thyroid, lymph nodes. A lot of their exercise and eating and having a healthier structure, they could be emotionally focused. So if you have an exercise strategy or a health strategy, you need to consider the emotional part of it. And what that means is that you need to have a plan A, B, C, or D, depending on your mood. So if that day you wake up and you're just like, I'm feeling depressed, I'm not feeling good, I'm feeling stressed out, your exercise and what you eat and your health strategy needs to match and consider in case of what were to occur or what that mood is based on. So let's say focusing, let's say if you have a health problem experience that can link into your emotion as well. For example, some people they have experienced a lot of stress. Some people want to have they have a water sign. So their body is very sensitive to that emotional state. So now let's talk about fire signs. Fire signs control the organs, so heat and movement. They need fuel. They need to eat. They cannot be on a strict limited diet because it doesn't provide enough nutrition for their body. Their body will use that energy. So maybe you've noticed that, if you are a fire sign, you sweat easily. That means you do have strong fire placements. Maybe some fire placements need to consider nutrition and value of their food. So maybe not eating enough protein, not eating enough carbs to support the exercise strategy that they're doing. So now let's talk about earth signs. So earth signs control the bones, root energy, and also consistency. So earth signs needs to have stability as well as rhythm. Earth signs tend to be hard to start, but once they do, hard to initiate, but once they do, they'll be hard to quit. So as we see, each sign have their own tendencies. So when you see this and they don't treat their health with care, you see when it comes to air signs, you'll notice that they have a lot of gas, constipation, diarrhea. They feel a lot of anxiety, fainting. Blood circulation is not great. Blood pressure. There are those symptoms that can come up every so on. Maybe sometimes you'll have them for a short time and you feel great. No, they too tend to be reoccurring and do come up. That's when we need to focus on when and where that's occurring and what trigger is causing that symptom. So now for water signs, remember they're based on emotion. So they notice that once they become off balance, they tend to have burnout, joint pain. They also notice mood swings. Remember that when it comes to their physical issues, it's very dependent on their emotions. So the first thing that water signs need to focus on is their emotional state. When that is nice and settled, then they can work on other things and other goals that they have. When it comes to fire signs, when they're unbalanced, the injuries, burnout, rashes, sweat, cold sweats. So that's when their energy and their body are in balance or not aligned. For fire signs, they definitely need to focus on how much they're consuming and how many calories they're consuming, their nutritious value, and how much of their output that they're providing. So input and output, there we go. It must be balanced and balanced well. When it comes to earth signs, there's lethargy, digestive issues, starts to correlate with the consistency of what they eat as well. So, like I mentioned, it's all about consistency. So, when they start, earth signs, that's where they thrive. So, they have an exercise routine and a diet that they're doing. It must be pretty stable, not like air signs that are more flexible in their exercise routine and in their diets. So, air signs, like I mentioned, prefer a variety of stimulants. They can't do everything all at the same time. They become really bored really quickly. So they do different activities that stimulate their minds and get them excited. So dancing, team sports, running, hiking, cycling. Something with fresh air tends to be good for an air sign. For a water sign, a lot of water sports or something that emotionally collective. So something that can be expressive for them to let go of their emotions without having to mentally process so much. Something that'll connect with their body. So swimming, surfing, yoga, flow, stretching, Pilates, walking. Fire signs need to be high sweat. So they really do need to sweat. So sweating is good for their to detox their system. So you should do high cardio exercises, high intensity workouts, wrestling. Their goal is to be able to have their heart race and sweat. That's what's good for them. When it comes to earth signs, weightlifting, yoga, hiking in nature, rock climbing, endurance sports, and like I said, something consistent. So once they set that consistency, they notice it. If that consistency changes, they can, earth signs can become a little agitated and crabby. I know that I expanded on some of dietary needs and exercise. Now we've talked about exercise. Now let's talk about dietary needs. So for air signs, um, they need to something small that they eat throughout the day. Lean protein, like chicken, fish, oils and sauces and dressings. You can't forget about that. Seeds, nuts, raw foods, and fresh herbs for that flavor. When it comes to water sign, the best match would be heavy water-based fruits and vegetables. So juice, coconut water, salt. Salt is a very integral part and a good thing for a water sign diet. When it comes to fire, they need to be protein heavy. So a lot heavier foods, a lot of more iron-rich proteins, such as red meat, because they need more fuel. So let's say hearty soups, stews, cinnamon, cayenne, spicy, like their sign. When it comes to earth signs, they like soups, fermented foods like kimchi, sauerkraut, legumes. It's important to mention that a lot of people have negative um, earth signs really do love the balanced nutrition. So without any extremes. So if it functions well, it functions well. So if they cut too much sugar and fat, earth signs will be more addicted to bounce back to those types of foods and a higher percentage of fats and sugars. But to be able to have a good balance in their diet and have stability, it can be uh, for grains for their foods. Of course, before we move on, I just want to make sure and mention that the foods that are here, of course, not included with an individual's allergies. They'll need to be considerate of that. Air signs, I know they don't have any patience. So now we've gone through, I've mentioned balance, I mentioned how to balance their, and now balancing through diet. So it's balancing the sides through foods. It's opposite of just food. Opposite signs food. For example, let's say earth sign. What is the opposite of an earth sign? It would be air, right? An air sign. So a fire sign, the opposite of it would be a water sign. So if there's too much fire, you put a little bit of water. So that is in correlation as well with foods. So if you want to balance your, let's say your fire sign, you're noticing a lot of sweat and you're getting hot, drink more water. That's a good example of a comparison of what that looks like. Earth signs, notice that if they need to decrease, they need to be more flexible. They need to be lighter. Maybe they notice that they're tired quite often. They eat less frequently, so they eat lighter protein to help them get out of that lethargy. Okay. Oh, you guys can look at that. Give you a moment to look at that. I think I forgot to mention in the beginning, but I'll include that now. I do have notes available for everyone, if including the notes at the end of this webinar. So I'll have a document with all the information because I know this is a lot of information to consume all at once. All right. So we talked about the signs and the planets. Now let's focus on the houses. We have 12 houses in our natal chart. Each house represents a different area of our lives. So we have a few houses that are in correlation with our health. So these houses can provide a lot of information. I'll explain more. So for the first house, if you notice that is the rising sign, that it matches with the first house. So that's where we look at our nutrition, our fitness, and our vitality is in our first house. For example, let's say you're a Leo. Maybe you notice that you're sweating a lot. Maybe you notice that you're hungry easily. If your rising sign is in Leo, means that you need to consume a lot more meats more often and drink more water. That's a good representation of how you observe your first house. Then we go on to the sixth house, and that represents our habits, our routines, as well as our self-care. For example, let's say your sixth house. We have one example, let's say Libra. That represents balance. So If you're on your rising sign and your habits and routines and self care require a lot of consideration and balance, you can't be off kilter or go to extremes because that would trigger hormones, moods, and health issues and instability. Now we go on to the eighth house. Again, if you there's specific placements where that's not my intention here, but say the eighth house does have some correlation with long-term chronic struggles or crisis. And I know a few of you have, let's say, a moon in your eighth house, so you struggle with fertility. One example would be if you have your moon on the eighth house and you notice that you aren't able, it just doesn't necessarily mean that you never have children, but it's for some individuals. So it's interesting in that comparison. So your eighth house has a lot of different expressions, let's say for Aries or so on and so forth. So if you have a planet in your eighth house and you have issues connected with that planet, not always necessarily, not always, but sometimes, it really is your own personal experience and journey. So now we have our 12th house. So we've talked about body and nutrition and emotions, exercise, all those things, but the biggest part of your health is your mental health, of course. So the 12th house is representative of mental health and how you approach a healthy mental health. So for example, if you're, let's say, a spiritual a person in well-being, so for Pisces, if you're Pisces in the 12th house, maybe the best thing and you're most in tune with your spiritual practice. Sleep is also representative by the 12th house. If you have a planet that is a lot more harsh, you will notice that you have some issues sleeping. Other planets represent, let's say, strong dreams. You'll have more dreams more often during the night. So, observing the planet in which house can tell you how your sleep patterns would go. So, I know that I've thrown a lot at you and a lot of information for you to do all at once and looking at the PowerPoint and watching me sign, and you're just like trying to follow and missing some things. Don't worry. Again, I did have some notes on each one that I'll be sharing. But I wanted to give you some examples of the overall, what it looks overall. So let's say you are a Gemini. That is your sun sign. What that means that you're active as well as an air sign, and your energy level is going to be social, high energy, exercise, and that are socially based exercises. So meaning dancing, or anything that has that variety, that curiosity, what stimulates your brain. That's one example. Now, let's say if you're a Gemini, your energy needs more, let's say a frequency of exercises, more stability with your exercises, not being so strict. I must go to the gym every Tuesday. That is the fastest way to get a Gemini to quit on something on an exercise routine. But the best fit for a Gemini is figuring out by the week what that mood and what's available and what we want to do and allowing that flexibility. When it comes to the diet, you Gemini is not based on following a book. They get bored very quickly, so a lot of varieties and quick meals in the refrigerator, so you can fall back on, so that would better match a Gemini. All right. Next, let's say your moon. Let's say your moon is in Cancer. Cancer is a receptive water sign. So the moon represents what we need in nutrition and food and to care for our bodies. So for a Cancer, they need a lot of water-rich foods, coconut water, salt, but also, if you notice, if you overly emotional or sensitive or depressed or just feel off, maybe you're just being overactive because you are a water sign, so you need to do the opposite of the element, which is fire. So for a Cancer, really focusing on the emotional triggers, like I did mention, if you notice rash or stress, that is a trigger. That stress is causing a trigger for that rash. Let's say you're having inability to sleep. That can be a trigger. You've had a hard day. So those are factors that are very important within a Cancer to consider with their nutrition as well as their self-care. Let's say for your rising sign, you're a Taurus. Uh, Taurus is a receptive earth sign. So the rising signs controls your first house. Remember that. So our physical bodies. So Taurus are not high energy. They're low energy, but they're very strong. Because it's fun fact, a lot of Tauruses that are rising are wrestlers because they tend to be really strong. They have good bones. They're tough. So Tauruses are committed and prefer high endurance and overtime. And they also have high pain tolerance for stress and high stress tolerances. One example that's one example you can see from your rising sign. Let's say, like I mentioned, we have the two planets that they might have more of an impact or an effect, a negative effect. So for example, if you notice that you have issues and you are overly injured, that means that are let's say low energy. So let's say, for example, it's unbalanced or underrepresented or not being cared for. So I'll use the example of Mars and Leo. Mars and Leo might overheat, chronic back injuries, muscle pain, heart health problems. When you notice all those things, all those issues reoccurring, it means that your Mars needs to be a little more paid attention to. So I found a good representation of the houses, what I thought when it comes to how they work together. So I mentioned we do have those four houses that represent our health. Let's say Saturn represents long-term chronic issues. So if Saturn comes up in two different houses, those are expressed differently. For example, let's say your Saturn is in your 12th house, maybe is representative of difficulty sleeping, insomnia, struggling with mental health, compared to an individual who has their Saturn in their 6th house. They struggle with routine, hard time continuing habits, and also neglect self-care. Those are two different expressions of the same planet in two different houses. So that's very important for you to be able to observe which planet, where it's located in which house in your chart. So how does using all this information that I just dumped on you, how can you use it in different ways? So I've already mentioned that you want to work with your energy and work with your personality and work with your body. So one person might be high energy, good for them. But if another person might not need that much exercise, you label them as lazy? No, they don't necessarily are lazy or need to stay in that high energy or high exercise to be able to be healthy. So astrology really looks at what your new unique style is and what that looks like. It also is how you eat and how you exercise, how you self-care and mental health, emotional health. Each sun or each sign and how they approach in those areas can differ. As we look and we see where our houses are placed and look and see what your values are, what your needs are, what your strengths are, and also what are your areas of improvement. That information will really help you understand and work with best with your energy. So now, how do we approach things? How do we get things done? How do we get that stability, build those habits? It's hard if you it's hard time having a routine or something that's a lot easier. Knowing that start developing those things that match what you're focused in and what is best. So let's say building habits, taking care of ourselves best, and embracing who we are in our nature and your personality. We need to work with it, not against it. We want to set ourselves up for success. So, I have enough time for some questions. First, I wanted to include a link. Um, I know I gave you a ton of information, so I'll add that link to the chat. Wow, we learned a lot from that presentation. Um, I see some things that are definitely applicable to me, and I totally make sense. I am a very fast pace. I can't do marathons. I'm a sprint runner. And so I learned something new about myself. So we do have two individuals that have questions. Now we have more. First person asks about food and workouts. So we focus on the sun sign only for those. No, we focus on the overall of your sign. So meaning, let's say your sun shows how much energy you have. Your moon represents what you need to eat, and your rising represents how you can express your energy. So each place has a different representation. So for your needs. Okay, got it. What do you mean if you had no planet in a specific house? What does that necessarily mean? You can still look at what sign controls that house. So a sun will give you a lot of information, sun sign. So like you recently mentioned, if you're a Libra, you have a Libra in your sixth house. It means that you need a lot of balance in your strategy. You can't go to extremes. You can't be restricted in your diet, and that will be unsuccessful for you. So if you look at I can go in more. I mean, I'm sorry, you froze a little bit. Okay. All right. You're freezing a little bit. Yes. So if you look at let's say your sign and which house rules that sign. So in your natal chart, in your wheel, you'll see what your rising sign is. So that means if your rising sign is in Aries, the next house would be your second house. It'll be ruled by the Taurus. Okay. Got it. All right. Says which sign mostly influences your health, sun, moon, or rising. If you write what you're mentioned as your moon, right? Or does it matter? All of them, actually. All of them are really equally as important. One is not more important than the other. Maybe it be unique for you is a little bit different. So maybe your chart is very strong on the moon sign. So that means that you need to focus on the moon first. Some people are lenient towards more towards the sun. So the sun needs a lot of attention. So it really depends on the placement, the signs. It can be really complex. I don't know if you know the answer to this, but I'm not sure it's related to health. But a person is curious if how do you find a compatibility like a partner to be married or explore the soulmates? Really is using sensory. That's a different chart. Um, I'm here and we're focusing on the health. So if you wanna you can definitely get in touch with me. We can look at that, but we're focusing more on the other health chart. Where can I learn more in depth about my signs? Do you have a website that I can look at and look at a birth date and get my natal chart? There is a basic generator that can help you look at what your chart looks like. I typed it in the link. That chart will give you kind of your own chart, and then it can expand more and do your own. You can do your own research, and I'll put that up there. I assume that you do readings or yes, I do readings. So you can do those readings of those charts. Yes, don't be afraid to ask for sure. Yep, you can contact me through my website, um, or on Instagram or whatever platform that I'm on. So or through email. Any way. There's many ways to get a hold of me. Awesome. Let's see if we have other ones. What do you think would be the best books or resources to look at health with astrology? Or maybe what's your favorite one for health, if there is one? As you can see, I have many books here about astrology. Actually, I do have a favorite one. It's called, that book name is called Body Astrology by, I'm terrible at authors' names. So, uh, let me look at it. The name of the author is Claire Gala. Let me sure it's Gallghur. I'll type it in the chat as well. Yeah, that'll be definitely would be very helpful. I included the name of the book and I include my references, my contact if you can. Okay, so we're going to email everyone the recording when I email that, and we'll email it as well with the information. So we do have two questions. Um, so CoStar app, is that a good, are you sure about CoStar? Okay. Is that a good resource? Uh, I'm resistant to CoStar myself. Um, I have other apps that, that I can recommend. I'll probably, one that I can recommend would be the best app, in my personal opinion, will be Time Pass or that but those are the two apps. CoStar can't miss a lot of information. It's not representative of your full natal chart. You have to look for that. So it's not beginner friendly per se. So when you look for uh, more in-depth for compatibility, um, it doesn't consider that person, let's say, aspects or connections to that individual. So it can be a little complex. It's not my best recommendation. Oh, that's new for me to learn too, because I use CoStar. All right. Last question, and before we wrap it up, the apps are Sanctuary or Time Passages. So we're curious, does signs change from time to time, or is it always the same? It is the same. There is, technically we can go in deeper, but for your personal birth chart, it stays the same. So pretty much, so when you're born, that's like a snapshot of your map, your natal chart. Exactly, exactly, and that never changes. Yep, your natural birth chart is equivalent to your life. So how to, and it's almost like your instruction manual, and that would be your star chart. That's how it would be an example of that. Well, I think we're going to wrap up. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate you sharing all this information. And like we previously said, we'll share with you through email and apps and links to your website and Instagram and all your socials. And I'm sure people are going to want to be able to contact you. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us in this webinar. I've been nervous all day, but I'm so very excited and I'm happy that everything worked out. Yeah, I think it worked out beautifully. Yes, yes. So we're continuing learning about your webinar and your notes and figuring out from here on out. So I guess for me, I get really bored easily. I start, but when it comes to finishing, that tends to be the hard part. So it's an interesting journey for me figuring that out. So take care. Thank you everyone for joining and have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.